Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about squaring up the front end of a car. Now, most of this information I'm going to give you, it's nothing really new, but it's some little tips and tricks and stuff I've picked up over the years. Some things you may just overlook and you'll end up with a problem. Either you get your front end all trammed, it's square, but stuff doesn't fit right. So hopefully we can address most of these issues with this video. So I'm going to start with front end of a unibody car. Now let's assume that the frame rails are where they're supposed to be. It's straight. You're going to put in a new core support. Now we're going to actually cover mostly steel core support. There's a lot of them going to plastic now, and there's not a whole lot of leeway. You put those in, they're either going to fit or they're not. But steel, you can still tweak them. They could be maybe the way it's stamped, it's not fitting exactly right. So for this video, we're going to focus on steel core support. Now the first thing you have to check when you're putting one in is your height. Now, assuming that your frame rails are where they're supposed to be, I'd usually take, and you're doing this on a stall or in a frame rack, measure down and make sure both sides are sitting even. You could have a low tire, it could throw it off a little bit. So you always want to come back and measure the height on your core support when you put that in. But sometimes you'll have a variance in a frame rail. Maybe it's deformed a little bit on the end or something where you're trying to measure to. I'd always double check. Come out here to your rocker panels and measure side to side. That outside edge, that's going to tell you if your car is sitting level. If you're putting in a core support, usually your fenders are going to be off. You could also come up to the A-pillar and measure a spot on each side, a hinge bolt, and measure that down to the floor. You want to make sure your car is sitting level before you try and level up your core support. So that's your foundation right there. That's the first thing you need to check. Make sure everything is level. The next thing is length. Now here's where a lot of guys will get into trouble. You put a core support in and you tram this and it comes out right on the money. It's right where you need it. You weld it in, but when you go to put the car together, everything is off just a little bit. Well, if you don't have your length from here to here set right, and a lot of times you can take your core support and you'll see the old paint mark on this upper rail, and you just match it up to that and you weld it in. Well, this new replacement core support, it could be stamped a little bit different. Maybe the hole for the fender is a little bit different. So if you just rely on an old mark, you may be off. So if you're off, say, 3-4 millimeters in length and you're down too far without knowing it, when you tram that, this dimension is going to be a little bit longer than this way. So you're going to actually try and pull that core support, shift it over this way to compensate. Well, now you got it nice and square, but what you didn't realize is your length is off. So that's the next thing you need to check. Now, most of the cars now, they're going to those brackets where the fender bolts to it here. And those you really don't use those for measuring. If you go in your crash guide or something and you want a quick under hood dimensions, you know, that's what they'll go off of, because that's about the only thing you can access if you just pop a hood open on a new car. They'll have a closeout panel, you know, there's not much they can go off of, so they use those. Usually you come up here somewhere in the core support, you might find a radiator mount bolt, a headlight mount bolt. Don't rely on these brackets anymore. If they do still have bolts in the, you know, just a bolt into the upper rail or core support, fine, that's what you want to use. But make sure, the next thing, that your length on that core support is right. Now what I've run into more and more, well, Ford's doing it, Honda's been doing it. I like coming back here and taking a bolt out of the hood hinge and using that mark, coming there from there. Once in a while I use the strut towers, but I don't like using them as much. So now what they decided to do, they started putting the hinges on the outside edges of the upper rail. Well, so that doesn't do you any good. So I've used, and it works good, this outside edge of your A-pillar. Now this you'll have to have somebody help you with the tram gauge, because you have to hold it right on the apex of that curve right there, and you can use that if you have to. That works out good. That's going to be a dedicated spot. There's not going to be any variance in there, so that'll work. What I don't like doing is using a tape measure. Sometimes you have to, or you got a good access point, but a lot of times you'll have an air box in here, or you might have a fuse box on this side. You run that tape measure, you can't get a perfectly straight shot. You're going over something. Anytime you're doing that, you're going to throw it off. And as critical as these front ends are, you usually got 0 tolerances. A couple millimeters here or there is going to make a big difference. So, well, another thing they're doing too that makes it a little bit tough, same thing with the Ford and Honda, they're making this A-pillar. Those things are hollow and they'll bend around. So there you got to find something else to use. A lot of times too, they're putting the cowl, either the cowl screen or something over the strut towers, makes it difficult to access. So you have to find something that's uniform from side to side, a dedicated hole to tram this correctly. So once you take care of these issues, get your height set right, get your length on that rail or on the front of your core support, and then worry about your width, everything should fall into place a whole lot easier for you. Now what I've seen guys do, putting the core support in, and they go to tram it, and they need to go one way or another, and they're butted up against this rail, and there's a gap over on that side. Well, that tells you that your rails, you still didn't get them. You're off a little bit. It could be 2, 3, 4 millimeters, not a lot, but it needs to be taken care of, because I've seen guys who spend literally days trying to cheat this whole front end. And they'll put a pogo stick and a clamp out here, and they'll try and tweak it. And you may get your hood to line up finally, but if you throw this out of square, everything from here on in, you're going to have problems. You're going to fight your headlights to put those in. You're going to have to either be shifting them over. You're going to have to either ring some plastic tabs so you can slide it over. Both headlights are going to fight with that. Your grill may be attached to your hood. You pull the grill down and the hood down, and now your grill is off. So you're cheating something again. And after, I've seen guys do this, hours, instead of just putting it on the frame rack, pulling the rails over where need to be, spend all this time, and then you're going to have to shift your fenders and get everything. Your fenders aren't going to fit right with your headlights. And you may finally get everything where it's passable, it's not too bad, and the last thing you need to do is put your bumper cover on, and guess what? It keeps popping out on the ends of the fender. And you think you've about had it done, and that's all you got to do is put the bumper cover on, and now your bumper doesn't fit to the fender. One side is popping out. That usually comes back to not having this core support squared. And a steel one, it doesn't take much anymore, as thin as these are, to rack these things to get them to your upper dimensions where you need, but it's going to give you all kinds of problems down here. So come back to and check. Usually, a lot of times you won't find holes that you can tram that core support with, but you can set your tram, the pointers, or your tape measure to fit inside these corners, corner to corner. Find something to let you know that that is square. And it's going to save you a whole lot of trouble in the long run. Your front end's going to go together so much easier. So I hope this video helps you. Like I said, it's just tips and tricks that I've picked up or developed over the years just to make stuff go a lot easier. And that's the intent of this video. Oh, one other thing I want to say before you turn that video off. These front ends are getting shorter and shorter, seems like every year. And the tram gauges we had years ago, you know, they're so long at the minimum. You know, that's about all you can get out of them is almost 3 foot. And some of these cars are getting so short, if you want to do a measurement here to here, you got to spend $500, $600, $700 on a new tram gauge. I've got a video out there. If I remember, I'll put the link to it up here. But I show you how to make a tram gauge out of a piece of cardboard for these close measurements where you want to go from here to here or something. So check that out, and thanks for watching.